Israel and Laodicea. This is the title for today's lesson, May 19, 2012. It is good that we go through such a topic because Israel were an example upon whom the ends of the world are come, and that is us. So we want to look there and compare them with us that we can understand where we're going, because it was a prophecy. It was a prophecy in more ways than one. And so as this lesson is put together, it's got some great content, and we're going to start with question 1. And it says, what was built under God's guidance to be the center of worship in Israel? And to what reality do God's people look today? So this question is drawing our minds to the belief of the Israelites and their worship. What was it centered around? Well, we obviously can read the first scripture in Exodus 25 where it points us to the sanctuary. Make them a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. So the center of all worship, firstly, was God with them. Emmanuel, God with us. God wanted to be with them. And this is none other than the gospel with power. Jesus Christ came to be with us, and that's the center of our worship. And here the Israelites had this center, and this center wasn't just about Jesus' earthly ministry and his sacrifice on the cross, but it went even more than that into to this heavenly sanctuary and his work in heaven for us today. And that's the scriptures that follow after Exodus 25. We see Daniel chapter 8 and verse 12, which is pointing us to the cleansing of the sanctuary, or the Day of Atonement. And then we pointed to Hebrews 8 verse 1, which points us to a high priest. We'll read that text in Hebrews 8 verse 1. It says, "Now of these things which we have spoken, this is the sum. We have such a high priest who is set on the right hand of the throne of the majesty in the heavens." So the cleansing of the sanctuary services that we are to in reality look upon has to do with the ministration of Jesus Christ. And the text in Hebrews 8:1 said, of the things which we have spoken. So that text tells us that what was written before Hebrews chapter 8 is all brought together in this one verse. All the things which we have spoken. Now this is the sum. This is the collection. We have such a high priest. Now the word such shows us the type of. What type of high priest do we have? Well, we just have to read what the text before Hebrews 8 are all about. So Hebrews chapter 1 is all about Christ's divinity. Hebrews chapter 2 is all about Christ's humanity. And then Hebrews 3 and 4 is about belief and entering into the rest that Christ is offering us through his divinity and humanity. And then Hebrews 5 is talking of the days of his flesh when he had offered up prayers and supplications with strong crying and tears unto him that was able to save him from death. So it's talking about his humanity again, and then Hebrews 6 was about how we need to grow in grace as Christ grew also. And then Hebrews 7 is about the order of Melchizedek and how he's a priest forever. And then we come to Hebrews 8. This is the sum. So the question was, what was to be the center of Israel's worship? And what reality do we have today? Well, the center of our worship is to be the divinity and the humanity of Christ combined in its application to spiritual growth and belief. That is what this question 1 is really indicating, especially with the use of Hebrews 8 verse 1. This is the sum. Everything before Hebrews 8 is an expansion on what the center of our worship is to be. The humanity of Christ is so important today. It's a very disputed topic, and many people don't believe that he was partakers of flesh and blood the same way that you and I are. Or that even the divinity of Christ, some people have pursuing the belief that Christ isn't equal with the Father, that there's a lack of equality there. And so, in so many ways, the doctrines and the teachings are being undermined upon what is to be the center of our worship, the humanity and the divinity of Christ, all summed up in one high priest who is working in heaven. When? In the cleansing of the sanctuary. These beautiful truths are so important for us to take hold of, because as the pen of inspiration writes, that the subject of the sanctuary was the key which unlocked the mysteries of the disappointment and opened to view a complete system of truth, connected and harmonious. Beautiful statement. So if we decide to start taking out some of these truths, then we're making something that was harmonious to be damaged, and it only takes a person to sing out of key for the harmony to be broken. And so we see this complete system of truth, which was delivered to through the prophet Ellen White, as well as the apostles of the Advent movement, the pioneers, and the Advent truths were built up, and the Seventh Adventist Church rose into existence through the hand of God. And so these truths must be safeguarded, and it's a principle of worship, not just a principle of doctrinal argumentation. What was the center of worship? What does the word worship mean? The word worship means admiration, to admire. So what is the center of your admiration? What do you admire the most? Do you admire Jesus Christ in his humanity and his divinity, and now in heaven for us, cleansing the sanctuary, seeking to cleanse away our sins and purge us from our sins in these last days? Well, that is, if we can worship that, then we're on the right track of keeping that the center. Okay, so that's the main reason. Every truth must be seen in the light that streams from the cross of Calvary. And so as these truths were given to the Israelites, they've also been given to Laodicea, as we can see that in question 1. Now, question 2 now talks about an organization or an order to enable the truths to be effective. And let's look at this here in the note under question 3, in fact. The note under question 3, it says, "The order so strikingly displayed in all the works of God was manifest in the Hebrew economy. God was the center of authority and government." So who was the center of this organization? It was God. Moses, as his representative, was to administer the laws in his name. Then came the council of 70, then the priests and princes, under these captains over thousands, captains over hundreds, and captains over 50s, and captains over 10s. And lastly, officers appointed for special duties. The camp was arranged in exact order. The tabernacle, the abiding place of God, in the midst, and around it the tents of the priests and Levites. Outside of these, each tribe encamped beside its own standard. So you can see that the center of this whole organization was the truth and God's power and God's authority. And then notice what it says in the next paragraph after that. It says, He, God, designs that we should learn lessons of order and organization from the perfect order instituted in the days of Moses for the benefit of the children of Israel. Who was the benefit for? The people. It was to benefit the children of Israel so that they will have access to the whole system of truth in a ordered way. And that's exactly what the New Testament church brought forward under question 3 in the verse where it says in 1 Corinthians 14 and verse 33 under question 3, it says, "For God is not the author of confusion, but of peace, as in all churches of the saints." So here's this order, and it was given, and we are called today to learn lessons, as it said in that statement I just read, to learn lessons of order and organization from the perfect order instituted in the days of Moses. So what Moses had there was perfect order. Perfect order. And as we consider that, as we have the truths delivered, we must never twist this perfect order. Now, let's have a look here at the order that was given. And the question under question 3, it says, the question of question 3, it says, what do we notice in comparing the organizational levels of the local church, the field conferences, and the unions with the organizational structure established in Moses? So this question draws our attention to how we're structured today. How was the Advent movement directed by God in the same way? Well, we see that the same teachings were there, and now we had God leading in a method of organization. And so it was that in the mid-1800s that the Seventh-day Adventist Church organized into levels of organization. Local churches, field conferences, unions, they have divisions, and then and a general council, a general conference committee. That's what was established. Now this lesson tells us that God was the center, and God spoke through Moses and delivered laws and principles of living. And so it is in the Advent movement that God spoke through an individual in bringing to light the organizational principles, as well as all the standards and the lifestyles that the Israelites were to live. As it was given by Moses, so it was given by Ellen G. White. And so the prophet that led them out and preserved them in Moses' day is now typified also in the delivery of a prophet to the Advent people. And Sister White indeed has given the counsels just like Moses did. Moses gave lifestyle counsels on how to live, hygiene laws, dietary laws, expounded on the offerings and the sacrifices of Jesus Christ. And so everything that Moses wrote, Ellen White has put in a current day delivery from God. And so from the counsel given through the spirit of prophecy, through the Moses, if you like, the organizational structure was to be established under that authority. God's authority had a mouthpiece through Ellen White, and the church was to cling to the testimonies of Jesus that were written out in the spirit of prophecy. And so we have here that there were to be captains over these numbers. Now, I want to ask you a question. If a person was going to be captain over a thousand, then how many people do you need? 1,000? Absolutely. So you can see that the organizational structure was built upon numbers. Okay, you had to have a certain amount of numbers in order to have the captain over that amount of numbers. You couldn't have a captain over thousands and he was really actually only a captain over 15 people, because then he wouldn't be a captain over 1,000. And so as we see this perfect order, let's gain some lessons from this, that perfect order means that you need 1,000 to have a captain over 1,000. Now, we have very strong reason to believe that the number given were men. So when it says captains over 10, we have strong reason to believe that that meant 10 men, because many families would probably have more than 10 in the family. As in Jacob, he had 12 sons. His family constituted more than 10, and so in those days the families were a lot larger. So when we see that a local the local church is equated with captains over tens. So a local church and the captains over tens is on the same level. So if the captain was over 10 men and their families, that could easily make the number anywhere from 50 to 100 actual souls in a local setting. And then you have captains over 50. So if you could have anywhere between 500 even up to 1,000 individuals, and then it goes on. And so the importance of this was revealed in question 2. It said, question 2, the Bible text, it said, "So Moses hearkened to the voice of his father-in-law, and did all that he had said. And Moses chose able men out of Israel, and made them heads over the people, rulers over thousands, rulers over hundreds, rulers over 50s, and rulers over 10s. And they judged the people at all seasons. The hard causes they brought unto Moses, but every small matter they judged themselves. And Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went his own way into his own land." And then the next text tells us that the Lord said unto Moses, "Gather unto me 70 men of the elders of Israel, whom thou knowest to be the elders of the people, and officers over them, and bring them unto the tabernacle of the congregation, that they may stand therewith thee. And I will come down and talk with thee there. I will take of the Spirit which is upon thee, and will put it upon them, and they will bear the burden of the people with thee, that thou bear it not thyself alone." So this was all about bearing the burden of the work. Now, how many people were in the camp of Israel? How many souls? We have reason to believe that there could have easily been 2.5 million individuals in this encampment. And so you can imagine that if you had 2.5 million, that definitely this was too heavy for Moses. And so there was importance with so many people. There needed to be divisions, captains over 10s, 10 families approximately, or 50s or hundreds. And so it is so important that we take the lesson that the order was given firstly because of the burden of the huge amount of people, and secondly that there was a way of dealing with issues small and great. So do you think that it would be contrary to this order to have captains over 10s, captains over 11s, captains over 12s, and captains over 13s? You might think, well, that's sort of strange to say that. Well, this is actually the thought of some people, that you would have a union, for an example. A union is equated with captains over hundreds. So captains over 10s is local church. Captains over 50s is a field conference. Captains over hundreds is a union conference, and then captains over thousands is a division, and then the 70 was the general council, and Moses is the spirit of prophecy. So, so we see that if we were to take a union, which is captains over hundreds, and we would say, well, what if we only had maybe 20 families? So 20 families, under 100 souls. And now we don't even have 100 souls. Now let's make captains over hundreds when there's not even 100, or captains over thousands when there's not even 100 souls, let alone men. And so you can see that it can easily, this order as given by inspiration is totally dependent upon numbers. if you don't have the numbers, then you can't have the rulers over those numbers because they're not there. So you have to, the structure needs to be proportionate to the amount of people you have. That is the order that is given here. Otherwise, what would end up happening is that you'd have a local church, and then over that local church you'd have a field and then a union, and the local leader would be the field leader, and he'd also be the union leader, all in one person. That is not order at all. And is it possible to have a disordered organization? Absolutely, it's possible to have a disordered organization. So if it's not ordered, is it an organization? That's the question. Is a poorly ordered organization really an organization at all? Well, that's for you to ponder that question, because what's the whole point about having officers for the sake of having officers, having a hierarchy for the sake of having a hierarchy, having these things just because, look, we've got to have them. We've got 10 people, but we need to have captains over thousands, so every person is a captain over somebody, and there's no one to be captains over. That is a defilement, total defilement of the perfect order that was instituted in the days of Moses. And so let us learn the lesson that organization is dependent upon numbers. Simple as that. And if there's no numbers, then the organization must only reflect the amount of people you have. And then it will be ordered. And if it's ordered, then it's an organization, because an organization is ordered. And so that's what has been counseled in question 3, 1 Corinthians 14 and verse 40. It says, "Let all things be done decently and in order." So it is possible to have too many officers, which leads to disorganization. And so, as that point is for us to consider, as the Lord had led the people in the time of Laodicea, of the Advent people, organization was a very key part in the development of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And so Ellen White, being a key person, came and she advocated order. For example, she wrote the need of having a union in Australia in the early days. It was while she was living here in Australia that she commenced on a program to bring in a union conference. And the membership, in fact, when that happened, the membership of the church was 40,000 people. 40,000 was the membership. And in the country, in the region here, there was 2,000 members. And so you can see the need. Well, you got 40,000, or you got 2,000 members in this region. There's room to have these captains over hundreds. When we're talking about captains over 100 men, that actually means more than 100. It can easily mean 1,000 or 2,000. And so here we have 2,000, and the guidance through the prophet Ellen White, who was the Moses, if you like, of in the Advent movement. She developed this organizational level based on the numbers. There was definite need of numbers. There wasn't like 90 odd people, or not even such a small amount of people. There was a large number of people, and the large number of people required the correct organizational to slide into that. So now the organizational development happened. Then there was a advantage given in the proclamation of the truth. Now let's look in question 4. In question 4, it says, "What great privilege did the people of Israel have?" What privilege do God's people have today? Now, the privilege was having God's voice amongst them, having the spirit of prophecy, having the testimony of Jesus. That is the huge spiritual advantage. The giving of the law, the testimonies on how we should conduct our life, how we should run, how we should occupy ourselves. These were given in the text if you read them under question 4. But notice the statement under question 4. It says, "The Lord made a special covenant with ancient Israel." What did he say? "Now, therefore, if," huge word, this is a little big word. "Now, therefore, if ye will obey my voice indeed, and keep my covenant, then ye shall be a peculiar treasure unto me above all people." And then later in the quote it reflects, he addresses his commandment-keeping people in the last days. "But you are a chosen generation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a peculiar people." What was it that made them a peculiar treasure, a peculiar people? Was it just having the truths laid out in a Principles of Faith booklet, or a declaration of truth, or a profession? Is that what made them a peculiar people? Notice it said, "If you will obey my voice indeed." What does the word indeed mean? Well, it means in action. Do it. In action. If you don't just have it as a theory, but if you live the truth, if you live the truth and keep my covenant, then you'll be a peculiar treasure unto me. So, just to be born as an Israelite, just to be part of the structure of the Israelites, didn't mean you were a peculiar treasure unto God at all. Even if you're amongst the 70. Even if you're in princes and leaders, that didn't mean you were a peculiar treasure unto me. It was all about hearing his voice and obeying it in action. That's what it's about, doing it and keeping his covenant. And so this spiritual advantage is given to us because we have the testimonies. We have the spirit of prophecy. We have the scriptures to enlighten us. We have the history to enlighten us. We have a huge spiritual advantage. But do we do it, is the question. Do we take the counsel or do we rebel against it? And this brings us to the next point of our lesson, question 5. Question 5 deals with a situation of rebellion. Now, Korah and Dathan and Abiram were princes. They were leaders. They were influential people in the ranks of the leadership of Israel. And who were they rebelling against? They were rebelling against Moses. Now, Moses, in as we compare it, Israel and Laodicea, if we're going to take Moses, then we have to understand that Moses and Ellen White filled the same position, that God used them both to communicate light to his people. And so what we have here essentially is that people rebel against the spirit of prophecy. Now many people think, well, no, the general conference or the union leaders, they are the Moses, and anyone who disagrees with them are the Korah, Dathan and Abiram, and they need to be dealt with. Well, it's just a manipulation of the truth, because Moses was an individual who was a prophet and who had direct revelation from God. God spoke to him and he saw it and he wrote it down in books. Well, so did Ellen White. And so we need to come to terms with the fact that today people in leadership rebel against the spirit of prophecy. They may have a council or a committee and say that their committee has more power to do things that the spirit of prophecy condemns. And so the rebellion of Korah, Dathan and Abiram is exercised all the time today. And we see that there is a rebellious discontent. A lot of people are discontent with the testimonies because it points out a lifestyle we should live, and a way we should behave, and a way we should conduct leadership, and a way we should even conduct our own homes, in the way we dress, in the way we eat, the way we engage in social activities. And a lot of people don't like that, and they have a rebellious discontentment with such testimonies. They say, I don't like that. And because of the murmuring of the Ancient of Israel, there was the punishment. And so it is that if we rebel, if we have a discontentment with the testimonies of Jesus through the spirit of prophecy and how we should live and how we should act, not just in theory but doing it, then we are going to have a bad fate, as we can see in the experience of Korah, how the plague came and the ground opened up and swallowed up the houses and everything that had to do with Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, as it says in question 5. You can study that out. And so that's an important point to take hold of, that let us not rebel against the spirit of prophecy. Let us take it and and let us work with that in accordance with everything that is written. And because of the point of rejecting the spirit of prophecy, there's a lot of murmuring and unbelief. I just don't believe it, some people may say. And because of this, we're still here. If we would take what God taught us with zeal, like Caleb and Joshua did in this lesson, we would actually be home already. We would be in heaven. Notice that statement under the last paragraph under question 5. Had Adventists, after the great disappointment, held fast their faith and followed on unitedly in the opening providence of God, receiving the message of the third angel and its power of the Holy Spirit, proclaiming it to the world, they would have seen the salvation of God, and the Lord would have wrought mightily with their efforts, and the work would have been completed, and Christ would have come ere this to receive his people in their reward. Receive his people to their reward, So this statement is saying that we could have entered the Canaan earlier than this point in time. Now this happened again also in 1888. There's a statement in General Conference Bulletin that says, Ellen White writes, that the Lord could have come within 2 years after 1888 if the church had accepted the message. 2 years! And the membership at the time of 1888 across the world was about 25,000 members. And so what it's saying, if the church of 25,000 people took hold of the message, how long? 2 years. 2 years, and Jesus could have come. Now, I've got a question. Why are we still here today? And we look back and think, yeah, they rejected it back then and they didn't do it back then. Well, why are we still here? We're obviously not doing it either. We're obviously utterly failing in our point of the message. Perhaps we concentrate too much on organisation and make vital godliness of no effect. That is possible. And so there is a delay in the entrance. And so it was in their day, so it is in our day. There is a delay. And so when you get people who are energetic with a good report, like Caleb and Joshua, as it said there in Numbers 14, the Numbers this is Numbers 13 and Numbers 14. It's both in the lesson. You can look at the story there, but when there's a Caleb and a Joshua who present the truth, often people get upset with them and want to stone them. But what is the cause of it? It's just sheer unbelief. People just don't believe in the truth and what is written to act it out. And so because of unbelief, because people have rejected it, then their carcasses shall fall in the wilderness. As it says in Numbers 14, the carcass shall fall in the wilderness, and all that were numbered of you according to your whole number, even 20 years old and upward, which have murmured against me. Doubtless ye shall not come into the land concerning which I swear to make you dwell therein, save Caleb and Joshua. So Caleb and Joshua were allowed to go in. They're the only two who left Egypt at such an age and made it into the promised land. Why? Because of unbelief. So this brings us to the next point that happens in Adventism, and that is a shaking. There is a shaking. And we read actually the shaking of some people won't make it. In fact, according to this shaking, most of the people didn't make it. So as for the leaders over the leaders over the tens, and leaders over the hundreds, and leaders over the thousands, and the 70, they didn't make it. It's quite interesting that only Caleb and Joshua did. But I mean, what about the 70? What about the general conference meetings? I would have thought that perhaps those brethren would have been into the promised land, but here we have evidence that they didn't make it. And so it's quite a challenge for us to think this shaking can actually shake out all the leaders. It's possible. Just an observation here of the lesson, according to the statement in Deuteronomy 14 there. It is highly possible for that to take place. Now, we see that whole leaderships can be shaken out. And we see that even in the terrible ordeal of the First and Second World War, that was the case. Has the shaking finished yet? No, it hasn't finished yet. As it says there in just before the meditation, the last statement under question 7, the mighty shaking has commenced and will go on, and all will be shaken out who are not willing to take a bold and unyielding stand for the truth and to sacrifice for God and His cause. So here we need to take a stand for truth. The principles of the spirit of prophecy need to be upheld at all costs, whatever the cost is. If people get upset, that's okay. You can get upset. But those who love God will hear His voice. So the shaking is all about taking those who are going to stand for truth and removing those who won't stand for truth. Because this term, a shaking out, often people have thought, well, here's the organizational structure and all the bad people will be shaken out of the structure. They won't be members anymore. Well, that's just a wrong observation, because the meditation says that the church is God's fortress, His city of refuge. It's a refuge which He holds in a revolted world. Any betrayal of the church is treachery to Him who has bought mankind with His blood, with the blood of His only begotten Son. From the beginning, faithful souls have constituted the church on earth. So when it says the betrayal of the church, our minds often think, oh yeah, that's right, because it's just the structure, just the Council of 70. That's the church. Well, the next paragraph qualifies what is the church. It's the faithful souls. Faithful to what? The truth. We have to be faithful to the truth, the principles that have guided us as an Advent movement from the beginning. And as we are faithful to all those principles in action, then the faithful souls, I read here, constitute the church on earth. And in every age the Lord has had His watchmen who have borne a what? A faithful testimony to the generation in which they live. These sentinels gave the message of warning, and when they were called to lay off their armor, others took up the work. God brought these witnesses into covenant relation with Himself. Here's the sanctuary message again. God with us. Emmanuel, make me a sanctuary that I may dwell among them. It's all about walking with God in action, in practice. And as He takes someone and brings them personally into covenant relation with them, then He works mightily with such people. It says, God brought these witnesses into covenant relation with Himself, uniting the church on earth with the church in heaven. He has set forth His angels to minister to His church, and the gates of hell shall not be able to prevail against His people. So in other words, if you are in a covenant relation with God, Satan cannot get you. the gates of hell cannot prevail against you. And as other people do that, that makes the church. And when you have lots of them, you need to be organized. If you don't have the numbers, then that's okay. You can only organize to the level of numbers you have. And if you try to do anything more than that, it's disorganization, which isn't organization at all. So just to conclude now, I want to read the statement from Testimonies Volume 5 under question 7. It says, "Soon God's people will be tested by fiery trials, and the great proportion of those who now appear to be genuine and true will prove to be base metal. Instead of being strengthened and confirmed by opposition, threats and abuse, they will cowardly take the side of the opposers. The promise is, them that honor me, I will honor." Shall we be less firmly attached to God's law because the world at large have attempted to make it void? It's all about God's law, the center of it, God's law, God's testimony, which is God's law, and His words. Should we be coward when it comes to God's law? You know that God's law isn't just about keeping the Sabbath holy. There's so many issues on God's law. Thou shalt not kill. That involves the war question of, should we be involved in war as a church? No way. The Bible also says, "Thou shalt not commit adultery," and there is an issue of adulterous activities that many churches pass over. But God's law says that if a man divorces his wife and they go marry other people, that's adultery, according to the scriptures and according to the law of God. That's adultery. And also the law of God is broken when there's dictatorship as well. When there is a rebellion against the testimonies of God and a commanding or a dictatorship to the people, the Spirit of prophecy says the commandments of God forbid such action by leaders. And so whatever it is on the law of God, it must be upheld because the law of God is exceedingly broad. And so I pray that we can take this lesson and ponder it and think, wow, what are the large proportion? Now we can look at other people and say, oh yeah, that's them. No, what about us? The large proportion. I pray that we can take this seriously because the Bible tells us these things happen for examples, for our learning, that we would know what is going to take place in the last days. I got a lot of great blessing out of this lesson. I pray you did also. And thank you for taking the time to watch this presentation. Please study your lesson thoroughly yourself. This is not to replace that, but just an addition and an assistance on that point. May God bless you, and we hope that you view another week. God bless.